I think maybe we'll open it up for questions. We can talk a long time here. Thank you for listening. So I saw I'm going to get a phone call in first hand. I saw the blue gentleman, the blue shirt and the collar, and then the plaid gentleman. So please stand up, project. Louder. Sorry, we can't hear you. You want to come forward? Somebody have a microphone. Great. Here we go.
All right. Yeah, how you doing? My name is Mark. The question is very simply, what are some of the issues that potential political candidates should be concerned about through the eyes of the media, off the record? I mean, you guys get criticized a lot for sensationalizing a lot of things that the general public generally wouldn't care about, and the same in reverse. You also get criticized a lot for shaping a lot of political campaigns. What are some of the issues that people should be concerned about when they're trying to run for office? I mean, Mike Bloomberg is not media savvy, but he gets the job done. His first term he was about education, I mean, government spending. The second term he was about education, and this term he's about getting guns off the street. Same as the hurricane, he's about getting guns off the street. He's not media savvy, he's very boring, very dry, but he gets the job done. Off the record, what are some of the issues you would like to see political candidates be concerned with?
Issues. Okay. Who wants to start, Matty? You look excited.
No. That sounds like a question for the media folks.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Jimmy? You're on.
It all depends. I think that Krystal and Steve kind of mentioned this, that if you run for the New York City Council and your message is about raising the federal income tax on millionaires, I don't care, because your message is not feasible, right? If you run talking about how you want to add 120-day review in the ULURP process for land use things, that's something you're going to have a real impact on. And if you have a well thought out, cogent position on it, that's what is going to be interesting to me. So I don't think there is an answer to your question. I don't think that there is a firm answer to your question. I think that depending upon the office and depending upon you and what you think is a good issue to be talking about is what I want to hear about. I want to hear what's important to you, and I want to hear your ideas, and I want to hear them as concretely as possible. And if you are running on a candidacy of taking guns off the streets, or running on a candidacy of raising the minimum wage, why not? If you have an idea, if you want to make it important, I'm receptive to it. I don't feel, there are some things where I would feel that you are destructive or just bad discourse. I thought all the writing about this Ground Zero mosque was stupid. I tried to do as little bit as possible. But some people did that, and some journalists took it and some tried to do as little bit as possible. But I don't think that, I don't have a good answer to that question. I don't think there is an answer to that question.
I have sort of a related corollary, which is, you know, we all in this room, I think it's safe to say, care deeply about the issues facing our community, our country, as do our fellow citizens. But the unfortunate fact of the matter is that people find it a lot more interesting to read about scandal, conflict, drama, a lot of times than they do the local land use agreements or whatever the issue might be. So another thing that you have to think about as you start your campaigns is, if we are faced with a scandal, if there's some story that comes up, how are we going to respond, and what's our sort of chain of command going to be, what's our strategy going to be? Because it's entirely possible, and I speak from personal experience because this is what happened on my campaign, that you will get very, very little written, very little attention coming to your race until everybody decides to start writing about something that you really don't want them to write about. And that's just, you know, especially, again, this is the difference between being a challenger, running in a tough race, running in a smaller local race, and being an incumbent, running for governor, running for president, et cetera, which gets a lot of coverage on the issues and on the substance, on everything else, as well as the scandals. So just something to keep in mind is that as much as you try to sell your story about what you want to do for the local community, as substantive and as wonderful and as important as it is, it may just be something that doesn't get a lot of press coverage because people don't want to read that story. They're more interested in the conflict and the drama. So the one other thing that I would say with that is we've talked some about creating a contrast with your opponent, right? How to do attacks, how to do them effectively, how to not necessarily have them come from the candidate. And the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to take some risks in that regard, because one of the very hard things is if you are running in this sort of uphill battle, you could find yourself in a situation where nobody writes about anything about your race. You run a very safe race, you stick to the issues, you stick to your message, but nobody writes about it because you never sort of drew blood from your opponent, and you never gave people a reason to think that they needed to fire the person that they have. So just something to keep in mind. The only safe thing about a safe race is you're safely going to lose. Okay. So you're probably going to have to take some risks.
Can I take 45 seconds just to make a point, which is take the mic.
And then we will get to the gentleman in the plaid, I promise, and this woman up here in the blue jacket.
And I'll hang out outside as long as you want and answer your questions. Tell you what you all know, which is you get up every day, everyone in this room. You have bills to pay. For those who have kids, you got to get them to school. You got to figure out how to pay for college. You got to figure out how to get them into college. You have your own professional career to worry about. You've got parents, how are they? You've got siblings, what's going on in their lives. And you just found out that the basement where you live is flooded, and in all likelihood, you're not going to have water for 2 days. And now, somebody walks up to you at the subway station and says, can you spare a minute to discuss an important race affecting your life, the race for New York State Assembly?
That's crazy.
Right? That fundamentally, what I've just described, is your problem. Right? And if you can't explain why what you just said as a candidate is true, why it really does affect, they're not going to listen to you. Now, why do they care that Kim Kardashian has just gotten married? I don't know. Or is engaged? Because it's easy, it doesn't affect your life, and it is, a nice way to pass 45 seconds and not really worry about anything. We have tabloids in this city that make a lot of money selling to that. But what you've got to do is understand that's what you're competing against. The problem isn't the media. The problem is all of us. Right? We have busy lives. And if you're not relevant, if you can't explain why you're relevant, forget it.
Okay, great. Gentleman in the plaid, woman in the blue jacket, and then we have the gentleman with the glasses on his head, the gentleman in the blue, and this woman in the floral print.
Hello. Steve, this is for Stephen. You mentioned that Cuomo had as a mantra, we need to return competence to politics. And then you went on to talk about a reporter calling up and saying, you made a mistake with this, it shows that you're not competent. How did you answer that?
Let's be clear. You're delighted with this, Alexis. That was a hypothetical situation. If that were to have happened, the answer would have been, before I ever got on the phone with that reporter, and by the way, let me take a big step back to one thing we were talking about. One of the things you want to do, not just with reporters, but with people in general in life, and we've all had this experience, if you know me, if you have a sense of where I come from, if you think I am a person of integrity, if you think that I am a decent, honorable, non-hypocritical person, you are going to listen to me and treat me a different way. If you think I am a jerk, a bully, a nasty creep, you're going to treat me another way. So one of the things that's very important is hopefully you are that kind of person and you have an opportunity to show reporters that. If you're not that kind of person, you want to behave that way anyway with reporters, because you want to be able to have an off-the-record dialogue. What I would do in that situation, if that happened, is I'd find out what they were talking about, I'd get the explanation, and in all probability, if we were talking about the Attorney General Cuomo's office, in all likelihood it was something that we didn't get wrong, it's something that the reporter didn't understand. And what I would then do is go back and explain to the reporter, these guys are chuckling, I would explain to a reporter the context and what really happened, and I would draw the sting on that and explain, by the way, under prior administrations that would have been a problem. Let me talk to you about how we reformed the office so you can see how we jumped on those type of problems. But what I would want to do, what I always want to do, if I can, is Alexis's point, I don't want to yell at you and say, off the record, you stupid, miserable creep. You got this so wrong. Instead, what I want to do is pivot off of it to make my point and bring it back to my message. And you know, the other point about losing your temper and yelling, my rule in life, I have 3 kids. My rule with them is, I want, when I lose my temper, for it to be such a frightening experience to them that it drives home a point, which means I can't lose my temper very often. You know, it's got to be once or at most twice a year. I have the same rule with people I work with and reporters, which is I reserve losing my temper for that situation in which it has tremendous resonance and impact on the person. In fact, I think I may be one of the few people the New York Times actually reported on me losing my temper in the connection with the marriage equality effort. But it had the intended effect.
Quick claim.
Sorry, before this lady speaks, I just want to make one point about oftentimes first-time candidates get into this state of mind thinking, oh, the media is screwing me, they don't pay attention to my race, and you know, and like we have to change the system, I'm going to educate the media about that. This comes along with the rules of engagement. You know, if you're not catching the media's attention, it's not the media's problem, it's your problem. And so ultimately, you know, this idea that, okay, you know, you get infuriated with the media, that comes with the territory, and you have to find a way to work around it to get the media's attention.
Just a quick thing for people asking questions, please state your name, and we will make an effort up here to keep things moving along, because I see a lot of questions, hands in the air.
Hello, my name is Shane Foster, and I have a question. My question is, if you are a candidate and you have something like in your background that you think the media might take and run with, like you didn't pay your taxes on time, or you have an illegitimate child, not to say that that's me. Should you put those things out about yourself in advance, or and if you should, like how should you frame it if it's not something egregious as like beating your wife or beating your wife, something like that? Yeah.
Okay, again, short answers, guys. Who wants to take this one?
I'll take it quick.
Jimmy and then Krystal. Quick though.
No, don't put it out in advance, but just tell me, look, it was 20 years ago and I was 90 days late on my taxes and I paid it with the $20 penalty. This is not a big deal. That's the best way to do it.
Don't say you have late filer syndrome.
Yeah. Don't say that there was an issue with the government, but just be honest. And usually it is not a big deal, because it's not a big deal for your life, and it's not going to be a big deal for your candidacy.
Yeah, I just very similar advice. If it's something you're comfortable with and you know that it's going to be in the public and you're okay with that, yeah, the best thing you can do is just be, when it does come out, totally 100% honest, get it out there, and then move on.
Thank you.
My name is John Crow. I produce a public access television program seen in Queens and Brooklyn. And the question I have for the panel is, most of your conversations were print so far. How can a candidate use public access, social media, to get the word out more effectively?
Is this something, Andy, you want to?
I'm not so sure about public access, but I think that's a really good question, but I don't know if I have an answer for that. But as far as social media, I think it's really easy. Just use it. Use it frequently, use it, embrace it, make your staff use it, and make it interesting. Make sure that it's not just, you're not just tweeting out press release headlines or your Facebooking press releases. There needs to be a voice behind it, I feel. And don't send naked pictures of yourself to anybody.
Very good advice. Matt, did you want to know? Okay.
No. Until he said that at the end, that was what I was going to add.
Okay. I was going to say, we have a gentleman in blue over here. We can, just a brief, quick answer to your question, a little bit about television. We have not talked about formal press conferences up here, but one way in which you will be getting a lot of your media attention is by calling a press conference and taking into account everything that's been said here about making it interesting, relevant, having a news peg, which I was going to opine on in a moment, but I want you guys to get your questions in. That's a lot of how you'll get TV. TV is going to be connected to news and a live event. There's going to be action. That's the only reason anyone watches TV. Gentleman in the blue, please.
Hi, my name is, again, Robert Pinter. This question is for Steve, Krystal, and Matt specifically. you talked early on in the presentation about the narrative of the campaign or the overarching message. And I know as a voter who pays attention and listens to candidates a lot, I get really bored with what I call the canned answers to questions, especially when the question is a difficult question and they always turn it into the answer, just hitting all of their, their topics for the day. It really turns me off on both sides of the aisle, whether the candidate is my candidate or the other side. I like to see a candidate have some genuine emotion and feeling sometime. I think it's very attractive, and I think even candidates that I don't necessarily agree with, when they have those moments, they're appealing in a certain way, but it's also risky, so the question is, is there a way that you advise candidates on how to navigate between the narrative and being real?
How do you fake the funk? I don't think you can.
First of all, my answers today, do they appear canned or do they appear off the cuff? Okay, I scripted all of this over the last 2 years. I have not said anything here that I was not prepared for. The entire panel, in fact, I will give some of you the script. Because this was all scripted, we got together last night, we ran it down, we then watched the video to make sure we all stayed in the exact place we were. You think I'm kidding. The truth is, and the answer to your question, and again, I'm trained as a trial lawyer, and I was a prosecutor for 8 years, a federal prosecutor. What drove me crazy is what you're describing. It was the lawyer getting up saying, hello, my name is Steve Cohen. It is my privilege and responsibility to represent the government of the United States. What is this case about? This is a case about a man who stole stamps from the post office. There was this canned way you did it. The problem with that is, as you say, it's boring. Now, you can say the same thing in your own words and do it in a way that doesn't get you into trouble if you are prepared, right? That's the trick. The trick is, and by the way, this comes naturally to some people. Some people, it's just not an easy thing. But if you know what you're saying, it becomes much easier to stay out of trouble. When people get themselves into trouble, as you're describing, why do people not just speak off the cuff or appear to? It's because they don't really know what they want to say, they're surprised by the question, and now they really are making it up. So the answer is, because look, when you make it up, you make mistakes. If you know something exceptionally well as a candidate, if you are prepared because you know what the questions are going to be, not the questions you want to be asked, but the questions you don't want to be asked, then you end up with a less canned, fake feel to what you're doing, even though you are prepared. And the better politician, somebody here talked about earlier how Mayor Bloomberg was not media savvy. I would argue Mayor Bloomberg is not media savvy the way Mayor Daley wasn't media savvy, which is they know what works and they know how to do it, and what they sell is the fact that they're real, this is who I am, yes, it doesn't sound prepared, but that's just who I am, and take me and love me for what I am. Which you probably would like, I don't know about Bloomberg, but Mayor Bloomberg, but you tend to respond to that. But that is, again, you're making a decision about how to present yourself, and the key is preparation. It's the only way to do this. As for the narrative, and I know I'm taking way too much time, but you may walk out here saying, oh, this is some special trick, you do the narrative, and this is like some secret with politics. That's not politics. That's not running for office. That's life. Right? You want anything in life. You want to present yourself. All we're doing every day is constructing a narrative, a personal story of who we are. You want to tell your story, you better hope that it is coherent and compelling. Whether that's if you're at a coffee shop meeting somebody new, or going on a job interview, or talking to your mother-in-law. Hopefully it is a compelling, coherent story, or else people tune you out.
I want to keep things moving, fellow panelists, so I'm going to keep things. We have Morgan, actually, a woman down here in the floral print who had her hand up first. Did you still have a question, ma'am? Great, I want Morgan to run over here quickly and get you. And then we have this gentleman in stripes. Gentleman in the suit, and I see you guys back there. We're going to make it quick. Panel, I implore you.
I'm Gwen Goodwin, and before I'm a city council candidate, I'm an American citizen. And I just am a little disappointed in almost all of your answers as far as the media is concerned, because it seems like what you're encouraging is stylized media with people that are writing, that are the gatekeepers who decide who gets published and who does not get published. And I think the way the media is operating today is low functioning and low mentality. And I think if Americans were given the choice and whether or not they wanted to see articles about real New Yorkers and real things that are happening, or Kim Kardashian, they would want to see the articles about what's going on for them right now. And I would like to see more of that encouraged. And I would also like to ask the people that are writing these articles, maybe you don't think it's important that millionaires might be taxed 35% more. But you want to know what? If I read it in the paper, I would think it was really important. And I think raw news is the most important news. And I think that people really should pay attention to what's happening in WikiLeaks. Because whether you like WikiLeaks or not, they are fulfilling a need that Americans are hungry for. And I'll just leave you with this. Right now, there are 3,000 people down in Wall Street, and they are protesting what's happening there. And you know, when I was there last night at 10:30, there was only one news truck. And you know what? To me, that is the news. And I got news for you. If more Americans were seeing that today, more of them will be there and would get there. Thank you.
Okay. Matt, I think you wanted to say something quickly?
Yeah. No, I
touch on
totally appreciate, I think, what you're saying. And what I would say back is, rather to Steve's point, is American citizens are making these decisions. You're buying the newspapers and you're watching the TV, and they're making money. I mean, their companies are making money off it, and perhaps there are different ways they could do it where it could be more informed. But what I would push back on you is, having been at many a Wall Street protest, and I love them, they're fun. The reason the TV cameras don't go, and when I pitch them they don't go, is because they say, you called me about this yesterday. There's a protest at City Hall about 5 times a day. Like, there just is. And so the challenge, I would just say, the challenge for us as progressives, or people who believe whatever they believe, is to take these substantive things and make them compelling. That's what we're saying. And I would say in defense of these folks, I think they're all, you know, for the most part, I'd say, fine journalists.
Thanks, I think we're going to go to this gentleman in the stripes.
Hi, my name is Dilip Chauhan, and just I want to give an example. Like the last Senate election, there was a 4 candidate, and just before the 3 days, just I want to know that this is the right way to do it, or they did right or wrong. Like somebody came out with the posters like this candidate is against local hospital. I mean that he is not against, but they came out with the big poster and everything. The other candidate came against with the something like he is against the
Can you tell us which campaign you're talking about?
That, Toby Stevesky, John Messer, and you know that campaign. Yeah. So this is the right way. Like suppose he is not against, and they come out with this way. So like, is there any rules and regulation that they can make a false statement or anything?
I just want to address it for a second. I think your field and consultant panel is going to address this more specifically and have a better answer for you. But just, I think the journalists up here would say the First Amendment, free speech.
Well, as Steve said, I mean, you can use that sort of criticism to pivot off and say, actually, I support this hospital much more than my opponent does. And you know, if there are ways to tie that to the campaign, to the opposing campaign that's putting out these false statements, those things can backfire sometimes. So I would say, you know, you can't really stop it, but there are ways to try and use it to your advantage, which don't always work, but I think that's what you have to look for in a situation. Okay.
Generally, in the last day and the last week of the campaign is when you usually see this atmosphere of anything goes, because the media will no longer have an opportunity to hold you accountable, and after you're elected, you can apologize. But, you know, the last 24 hours, it's usually a free-for-all.
I'll try to use my theater voice instead of my clip. I wondered if you could address briefly the, what I'll call the sort of he said, she said media discourse that is particularly prevalent in political reporting. That for all of what you're talking about attributing sources and versus background, it seems that a lot of times in stories, particularly on television, but also in other media, there'll be sentences with some would argue X or critics would say Y, which essentially gets talking points ultimately into the story without necessarily trying to verify.
Jimmy.
Yeah, it's. you ignore them when they're about stupid things. And when it's about a substantive issue, that's fine. Because let's talk about tax policy, right? The A1 of the New York Times major column today, Sunday, was about President Obama's plan to tax millionaires. He thinks this is a good idea. He makes a case. He makes his case. Other people don't think it's a good idea. They make their case. It's essentially he said, she said, but there's no right answer, right? This is going to be a legitimate debate. We're going to be talking about this ad nauseum for the next weeks, months, years. And it's not my job as an objective journalist to really pick a side and make that case as opposed to the other case. It's my job to referee. It's my job to make sure that everyone's being truthful. It's my job, depending upon your publication and what your style is, to maybe color the arguments a little bit more than other people would. But I don't think that a he said, she said is objectively bad. The thing I always try to think about is you're writing about an issue. And if it's an issue of importance, if it's an issue of substance, then I think those stories are great. If you're writing about a campaign where there are genuine disagreements over things, about important issues like taxes, should I pay more taxes, should you pay more taxes, let them fight, let them argue. I think that's fine.
I think this is going to be the last question.
The commissioner's next.
Okay.
I just want to know, how do you get out a subjective message or criticism? And for example, Steve, I don't know if you were involved with it back then in the governor's first campaign for governor. He said something about George Pataki, which I completely agreed with him about, holding Giuliani's jacket after 9/11. I don't think that had anything to do with preparations for attacks or post-recovery. Yet when the candidate, Andrew Cuomo, came out and commented on his carrying his jacket, he was heavily criticized. I happen to agree with him, but he was heavily criticized for it. How do you get that kind of a message out? Obviously not to the candidate, that probably was a mistake.
You mean the message, I think by the message you mean the response that, hey, it was a valid comment, what are you guys complaining about?
No, just getting out, Pataki's saying 9/11,
yeah.
But in fact he's not.
Look, and again, this is, this goes back a long while, and I wasn't there. I was, I don't know where I was in 2002, but I wasn't there. I think with a message like that, where, what rankled some people, I believe, to try to go back and get in that mindset, was anything that questioned anybody's involvement in 9/11 and the events immediately following it were considered distasteful. I think that was the objection. Now, if your point is, and I think the broader point may have been, and again, I wasn't there, here is a person who in a moment of leadership, where really a true leader should shine, he didn't, and by the way, that in fact you could argue was a metaphor for the prior 8 years of the governorship of George Pataki. That's a subtle point. And that's a subtle point. And once you know the sensitivity, I think the way you actually play that is to talk the broader issue and then leave it to somebody else to make that specific point. Then it's not the candidate making the point, and you don't lose the message. Sort of off the cuff, I think that's probably the best way to deal with that, and then you avoid the sting that came back at you.
Okay, I think this is the last question, then we'll conclude up here. I'll just finish things up. Commissioner Stern.
Yeah, let me respond to that. The reason the Pataki thing went wrong so badly is because it was criticized by someone who was viewed as a young whippersnapper attacking the governor of the state of New York in terms of who graciously played a subordinate role to the mayor and so on. It just came off so poorly that it gave all the people who had vague reasons not to like Andrew Cuomo a leg to stand on. But even I was surprised by it. This is my question. The people here are varying states of recognition, familiarity. How do they approach their local journalists? Do they have a meeting? Do they bring a press secretary or someone along? Do they try to meet them alone? How do they get themselves to be taken seriously by local reporters who are honest? but many of whom are quite condescending to politicians and have a dim view of all of them. So how do you show these guys that you're real and they should pay some attention to what you're saying?
Anyone? Andy, want to take this?
We all may be cynical and condescending towards politicians, but as journalists, we also love access. And we love campaigns and candidates to reach out and make introductions and try to set up meetings, whether it's informal at a coffee shop with just a candidate and a journalist, or if it's at an office with a press person there as well. But I think that it depends on sort of what point you want to make. If you want it to be informal and sort of start off on a good foot, be friendly with the reporter, if you want it to be very professional and sort of present your campaign's outline for how you're going to make this successful. There's many ways to do it, but you're not going to have trouble, I think, making those introductions as long as it's viewed as worth the journalist's time too, because as the point was made over and over again up here, everyone is very busy and has lots to do and lots of things to cover. So I think that there's many ways that can work.
I mean, it's our job is more fun if you make it a close race. I mean, if there's the presumption that we work for the state senate or the state assembly and are trying to quash small candidates, it's mistaken. I mean, I can tell you, it doesn't mean that we'll inflate any young candidates or anything like that, but it's more interesting. It makes our job more interesting to have these close races. I think the thing that you have to do is convince the journalists that you have a message and you have the resources. We see tons of challengers in almost every seat, almost every time, and it's just up to you to convince the reporter that you can sort of meet this threshold of being a sort of real credible challenger.
With that, we're going to conclude. I want to thank our panelists up here. They're all actually really exceptionally brilliant in their fields, and we're very lucky to have them with us.